All right. Thanks everyone for coming. You may ask questions during the talk, yeah, I'm not sure if there'll be time at the end or not, but please welcome Ruben, Pellicer, Guridi.
Thanks for coming this afternoon, the last day of the beautiful conference. As you can see, I'm going to talk about magnetic resonance imaging and for medical purposes in particular. And during this week, I saw many beautiful talks, and one of them I went to the presenter and I asked her, how did you make it so appealing, so engaging? And she told me, you have to show them something that they are familiar with. And I didn't know if you are familiar with MRI, so I didn't know what to bring. And I was walking through the hospital, next to the hospital, and I thought, I'm going to walk in. And I walked in and I asked them, do you have anything that of any famous person here in the city? Do you have any MRI image of the brain of the president or something like this? And they said, oh, we have something. And they put something in my USB stick. And when I went home, I brought it, and let's see if this works. Yeah, and this is what they gave me. And I think this is the brain of many presidents, no? That's how it looks. So to acquire this image, this person was very lucky. They didn't have to open this person, because we are talking about, let's see if I can make this pass. Yeah. We are talking about a technology that is able to see through the things without opening them. And that's one of the beautiful advantages of MRIs, that you don't need to cut it open. But it has also many other beautiful and positive advantages. For example, many imaging technologies, they need to use X-rays and this type of ionizing radiation. I don't know if you are familiar with these terms. So with photons, they can be harmful if they have enough energy to break electrons out of the orbit of the atoms. And then is when we call them ionizing radiation. And this happens when they are working at very high frequencies. And that's what the X-rays and CTs and this PET, for example, for this position emission tomography use. But MRI uses electromagnetic waves as well, photons as well, but they are at a way lower frequency. So we can see through the body without damaging it, without risking that we are going to create mutations or, in the worst case, cancer. And something that is fascinating, it is that it can do so many types of images. The way we play with the magnetic fields is going to determine what we highlight in the images. And you may have seen that people go to the hospital when they have a problem in the knee to be able to see the ligaments. With other machines, you cannot see them, and with MRI, you cannot see them that clearly. And with MRI, you can have very crisp images of the tendons and the ligaments to see if they are in good state or not. Other common uses are with the spine, for example, when you have a problem on the disc, or you may have a problem. And you may also have heard that it is used in the case of tumors, in cancer. It's very handy to be able to see if the tumor is doing metastasis and is located in more than one place, which spots have to be treated. And here you can see an image before the treatment. There are multiple sources of tumor. And after the treatment, you can double check that if everything is going fine. And these are probably the most popular or the most known applications of MRI, but that doesn't stop there, because the machine has so much, it's very diverse, the possibilities that you can do with the MRI machine. And every year, researchers are finding more and more applications. But these are not coming to the market that easily. In this image, I wanted to show you exactly the same part of the brain, is the same slide of the same person, and you can see that it looks very different. And it is because the way we apply the sequences, we can highlight different parts. In the image in the center is something that is starting to come up now. It is a way to detect, for example, iron depositions in the brain. And iron in the brain can be used to diagnose neurodegenerative diseases or aging, for example. So when we start to, it's something that happens, we slowly get more and more iron in the brain. But if it happens at different ratios, we can predict that something is going maybe a bit wrong. And apart from the brain, you can look at the heart. In this image, for example, the way the image was acquired was by mainly detecting the signal from the heart. And the signal comes from everywhere in the body, but because the one from the blood, or the heart, sorry, not from the blood, the one from the blood, we know the properties, we are able to highlight this and suppress the others. And in this way, we can see how the veins are, the arteries, is there any clog, is there anything broken, is there something to worry about? And this one is something that is very beautiful. It's a way, beautifully looking, it's a way to know how the nerves are connected in the brain. And the way to acquire this image is by looking at the diffusion of water. So water, if there is no border, the water diffuses everywhere at the same ratio. But if there are some fibers, like in the case of the brain, there are the nerves, for example, the water is diffused along the fibers mainly. And this is what we look in MRI, and we can see and create these images to see what's the connectivity in between the different parts of the body. But it doesn't only stop with images. You can also make, you can also know what's the components. You can spot one small voxel, and you do what we call a spectroscopy. And by looking at the different frequencies that are coming from that spot, we are able to tell, this is this component, or this is this other component. So you can be really precise in knowing what it is in there. Other applications don't stop in the structure. You can also see dynamic things. We are making it fast enough that you can see things happening in real time, and you can diagnose if there is any problem with any wall in the heart, for example, or there is any asynchrony. And something that many people may have heard is the functional MRI, that they use it to see which part of the brain are consuming more oxygen. That has correlation with which part of the brain are being activated. And they are using this a lot in research to know which part of the brain communicate with other parts, or which parts are being activated in different cases. It's basically to have more insight into how the brain works that we know very little still. And this is another application that I was working in when I was working in Rotterdam. That can you guess what we are seeing there? So it's not a human, it's a phantom, we call it. It's a synthetic material that we use when we are testing things. We don't want to put a person inside. So it's a cylinder, but the colors are reflecting temperature. When with the MRI, you can see how temperature is changing. You can track. And in this case, what we were doing something that is called hyperthermia, that it is after radiotherapy or chemotherapy in cancer treatments. If you heat up the temperature of the tumor around 42 degrees, you double the chances of killing the tumor. And the problem is that we heat it up with some antennas, a set of antennas, and by changing the amplitude and the phase of the antennas, we are able to steer the focus. And we are not sure if we are hitting where we were supposed to be hitting, because in our case, we were treating head and neck, and we have a lot of different interfaces, and there are a lot of reflections. So we may be creating a hotspot somewhere and damaging healthy tissue. That's why we were tracking the temperature, or we were aiming to track the temperature with MRI. And if you have enough money, you can also discover different things, like how the human voice is created. Like these colleagues from the University of Freiburg in Germany, they were doing. So the MRI machines are able to do, on one hand, help with diagnosis, on the other hand, understanding better science behind humans and biology. I'm gonna stop. It's a nice song. So you could imagine that with so many applications, we will be very safe. Well, MRI can do so many things. It's helping a lot of people. But the reality is that only very few are being able to use a very small fraction of what MRI can do. And this is because MRI is very expensive. And probably you have already been into a scanner. And the scanners, well, it depends. If you have paid from your pocket, you know how expensive it is, right? And how difficult it is to convince the doctor to take you to an MRI machine. And the main reasons of the costs are the scanner itself. The scanner, average field of 1 Tesla. Tesla is the field strength. The number is more or less defining how strong the magnetic field that the machine uses. 1.5 Tesla is about more than 1 million, and 3.3 Tesla more than 3 millions. And it's very expensive to run as well and maintain. These machines, they use superconducting material because they have to create this strong magnetic field that can only be created and maintained for a long time with strong currents. And we cannot use just copper because it will heat up a lot. And superconducting material, the beauty is that once you pump current through it, you can connect both ends of the coil and it will keep flowing as long as you maintain it in the superconducting condition, that it is very cold. And to maintain it very cold, we use liquid helium, which it was not that expensive time ago when there were not that many applications, but now there are more applications for helium and it's very expensive. And the liquid helium is evaporizing. So that's why maintaining these machines, it takes 10%, 14% of what it took every year of what it took to buy it. And apart from that, even if you have the money, you also need to have the space. In the hospitals, only big hospitals usually can afford having MRI machines because you need to have a specific room able to maintain, I don't know how many tons of material, to have a lot of space of security because the magnetic field, although we intend to generate it only in the center, that is where we place the patient, the physics are telling us the magnetic field has to go back. So it goes around, and there is a strong magnetic fields outside that are a security concern for the workers and the patients. So you need to have extra space for rooms nearby. There could be limited work being done. And all these things make MRI a scarcity. In the lower income countries, you have very, very few MRI machines. It's a rare thing. Often they have second-hand that they renew the MRI machines in richer countries and then they sell them second-hand. But even in the higher income countries, the MRI machines are still very expensive. So you have seen how many applications, and that was only a little bit of a few of the applications that you can have. And there are very few countries that can have it, and they can have it in, and they still don't use it for all the applications that we have seen. So you have long waiting times, and it's only some applications are only being done in very specific centers. And here I wanted to highlight that because you are probably looking at Australia that is white and New Zealand is white. That's there was no data available from this database, but there are MRI machines, I have seen them. Yeah, don't worry. So the MRI machines this is a very well-known thing. And in the International Society for MRI in Magnetic Resonance in Medicine, even the president is saying, this is too expensive. We have to prioritize where it is going to be used. And that's a shame. That's a shame that something that can do so much is limited by its price. And being so aware of this, the first option that most of the research centers are trying, many people are putting a lot of effort, is to make them faster. The thing, what happens here is that signal is so small that you have to do an average over a long time, sort of, in different conditions, but the signal builds up until you get enough quality and enough resolution. And they are coming with smarter things of applying the magnetic fields, so you can get enough signal in a shorter time. So something that will take at the beginning maybe 20 minutes, after accelerating the sequences, you can make it in 10 minutes. And then you will have 2 patients instead of 1 who will be able to use it in the same time. But there is another way that we believe MRI could move towards, and we will have to look at what makes MRIs more expensive. And in this graph, you can see probably that there's enough contrast. You can see that the magnetic field strength has a good correlation with the costs. And that is to make stronger magnetic fields, that it is where we are moving towards to create a better image, is making it more expensive. And in order to explain this to people that maybe are not that familiar with MRIs, I often put the example of cars, because 1.5 Tesla or 3 Tesla systems that are clinically available nowadays, they are the most versatile machines at the moment. They can do a lot of applications. And you may have heard that there are also 7 Tesla. And 7 Tesla machines, they have a lot of difficulties running things that work in 3 Tesla, may not work in 7 Tesla because there are some problems in translating. It's much more complicated to run at such a high magnetic field. So it will be like a Formula One. It's 11 millions to have a 7 Tesla, and you are limited to what you can apply it. You have a very fast car, but you cannot drive it in Christchurch. It wouldn't be functional, right? And something similar happens. It's not exactly the same, but in the case of the vehicles, only 10% of the people can afford having a vehicle worldwide. And can you imagine of what is the vehicle that more people have access to, looking at worldwide? I guess the bicycles. Yeah, my favorite. So bicycles, still only 80%. That's still quite sad, but 80% much more people can have a bicycle. And for what we need the vehicle in everyday life, very often a bicycle does the job even better. Sometimes you can go through narrower paths, you don't need to take that much space from the roads. And unfortunately, there is not a bicycle like MRI. There is not anything that is equivalent to the bicycle in the MRI world. You have to go for something that is very expensive. So basically, we are making something that it is for very few people and very limited application. And reasons to go to this lower field that I was saying, that there is no bicycle that will make it cheaper MRI machines, there are some positive things in there. It is cheaper, as I was saying, but it also can become smaller because the magnetic fields that is generating outside of the machine are smaller. So you don't need such a big room, which will end up being possible to make it portable. And you could have, for example, in Australia, a truck that is moving the MRI machine or a van that is moving the MRI machine for breast cancer screening in remote areas. And also, stronger magnetic fields bring a lot of safety concerns because what I said, but also because it attracts metals. So, and there are some implications that it will heat up the tissue or it heat up the implants. And there are many people that are nowadays exempt from being scanned in MRI machines. And because I guess, is there anyone familiar with the principles of MRI machines here or MRI physics? I thought I will explain a little bit how MRI works because it's a conference where I think there are many people with high curiosity. They want to know how things work. That's one of the reasons why we come into open source things, right? To understand things better, because it's a good playground to learn and to share knowledge. So in MRI, let's think this is a drop of water. Let's imagine, and you can see that it's showing different spokes, and those are showing magnetic fields. So the hydrogen, it's like a small magnet. It's not neutral in magnetic field. It's creating a small dipole. And that's what we are trying to, we are using hydrogen in MRI machines because we have a lot of water in the body. So we have a lot of signal. And it's actually giving us the signal at very convenient frequencies. I will talk a little bit later why it relates to frequencies. So what we do, if we have a drop of water with no magnetic field, everything looks in different directions, it cancels out. There is no magnetic field, resultant magnetic field. So we will put a detector and we will see no magnetic field. But if we apply magnetic field, there is a little bit of this drop, these magnets will tend to align towards it, a little bit, 1 part in a million. And then we will create a small difference in that direction. This means we are able to see how much water it is in there, for example, because if there is more hydrogen, we will have a bit stronger magnetic field coming out. And this explains why we are moving towards stronger magnetic fields, because the stronger it is the magnetic field, the bigger it is this preference for these magnetic moments to align. So we have a stronger signal. We can acquire better images. And the thing is that we create this signal, but we cannot see it because it's constantly looking in one direction. So what we do is we apply a magnetic field and we use radio frequency to be able to apply this magnetic field. So it's an oscillating magnetic field. And what we are doing is we are providing energy to this drop of water. And when we provide energy, it's not doing what it should be doing, but it should be rotated and stopped in one direction. But it absorbs the energy. You get the idea. It absorbs the energy, and then it releases the energy back. And then is when we can measure it. So that's the way we can see. On one hand, we have to create this net magnetization, but then we have to give energy and listen. And when we are listening is when we see that there is indeed water inside, and if there is more water, we have more signal. This way we will be able to know if there is any water inside and how much water it is inside. But we are talking about imaging. We have to create an image. So we need to know where it is coming from in the body, right? And this doesn't allow us to know where it's coming from. So what we do, this energy that is coming back, it comes at a specific frequency. And the frequency is dependent on the magnetic field that it is seeing. So instead of having a constant magnetic field along the whole body, we are having magnetic field that changes in different parts of the body. So in this case, we are changing it along the z-axis. The points closer to the head, they are going to give us the signal at a higher frequency, and the points closer to the feet at a lower frequency. And this we do it in X, Y, and Z, so we get a 3D image. We know in space where the signal is coming from. So we need, if we summarize it, we need a strong magnetic field to pump up the signal, and a radio frequency field to bring it energy and to listen. So we need antenna. It can be the same component that produces the magnetic field and listens to it. Very often it is. And we need to apply varying magnetic fields. Why do they need to change? Because in order to solve the inverse equation, to know where all this 3D space is sending the signal from, we need to apply a diversity of magnetic fields. That's why you also need mathematics, a computer science, because, for example, nowadays we are starting to use artificial intelligence, because sometimes in order to speed up acquisitions, we make very complicated the problem of reversing, knowing where the signal is coming from. The image of the heart that you have seen before, 4 years ago, they had to spend, I think, about a week to be able to reconstruct that. So indeed, it's real time to acquire, but it's not real time to play it. And now with artificial intelligence, they are able to teach algorithms how to solve the inverse problem. And you can have it in a few seconds, the image. Although they are not yet accessible, they are not well accepted yet. And you can see that this is used not only for medicine, but it's also for other purposes, biology and earth. People that want to study the minerals in the earth, they also use MRI. But the problem, we have to say this clear, that we know that we are running into trouble when we go to weaker magnetic fields. As we said, weaker magnetic fields, weaker signal. On one hand, the weaker magnetization, and also the detectors, they are less efficient. So we are running into lower, we know that it's going to be lower quality. But there have been already some studies that show that even if we decrease the magnetic field, we can have enough quality of image. And there's some publications that they have done for different applications. So we are not making something that is going to wipe out the technology that is out there, but we are aiming to bring something that it is complementary, that it is hopefully covering much more cases of many things that nowadays they are not being brought to the scanner because there are not that many scanners. So for example, we are aiming, the first project is to make an extremity MRI scanner, an extremity MRI scanner. And because we are showing that we are making something that is like a bicycle. I took this image of an open source bicycle that looks very beautiful, and you can personalize it for your needs. And I think that this is what the community of open source imaging is aiming to make the open source equivalent of the bicycles. And this is basically building up a community where we are going to, on one hand, build a complete system. We think that it's very important to have a complete system that we can build and we can test things on. Because if you have an idea, as a researcher nowadays, and you want to change something in the hardware, you have to take the risks of breaking a machine of millions of dollars. So that's not happening. You need to make a contract, only few people are able to touch things in the hardware, only very few parts of the hardware. So the hardware is very limited, and only big companies, maybe big companies, are deciding what to change. So if you have an idea, you have to either try to convince the companies or the ideas get lost. So if we make an MRI machine that it is already capable of making clinical diagnosis, but it is possible for small centers to reproduce, they are going to be able to test new concepts. And I believe that this is going to bring, it's on one hand, increase the signal, because the way we do the sequences, the way we acquire the signals, I think it's still very limited. I think there are a lot of possibilities still to run out there. And yes, the idea here, as you can see, it is not only to make this MRI, but it's also to gather what is out there, because we are not the first one sharing things on MRI or thinking that things should be shared. There are already some projects, so we want to gather what is out there already, even if they don't connect, even if they have done a part of the hardware that is not compatible with the rest, maybe someone can use it or can get ideas. So we are kind of building a bit of a network or a space to share. And yeah, we are aware this is quite a long shot. There is a lot to do, and this could happen. We get sunk in the math, so we need to project a bit of a vision, no? to try to get it right. That's the only thing we can do. We just can't try. So we think that there are 6 paths that we can cover, and this is a bit of a general view of the 6 paths that we can envision. The first thing is what we have seen this week. What sustains the open source communities or the open source projects is the community. The whole value is in the people, we believe. And if we put things together, we can build up together. And we can make things, the threshold to make things much lower. And we can make much more things, and we can improve the quality of what we do. Also, as we said, we're in the conference, this is not of open source, this is not a surprise for you. We want to do it hardware and software, and we think that we are developing this prototype, MRI prototype, but we also want to make the space to exchange the ideas, and we encourage people to make things modular. Even if they don't want to make the whole scanner, we encourage the ones that want to share to try to make it compatible, because MRI machines, they are specific. You have to change one thing because you want to acquire for the knee. You need a specific coil for the knee. So if we make things modular, like in open source software, you have a proper interface, things are compatible, you can use them together. And education. Sometimes education looks like this. There is one that is telling you what to do, and that's the source of information. You have to accept it. You don't know if that's all what it is out there, right? And we think that education should be much more open. And open means education, it goes in different directions. It doesn't only go from one that knows to people that doesn't know. I think that everyone know. We have knowledge on different bits, and if we put them together, we can learn much more. We can enjoy, actually, of learning much more. And that's why we are encouraging the people that offer things open source also to document them, to make proper manuals or explain well, the things like we saw with the example of Rory that is working very well with the documentation, good documentation on how to help people and encourage people to modify things. And of course, guidelines. The same way that we are in an area, MRI, it's not that common to use open source. It's not rare, especially in software. People have shared algorithms and things like this more often, but it's something that we still have to learn how to do it. So we are exploring what are the best ways to do. One of the things that we are encouraging a lot is to publish in open source, open access publications. So people don't need to pay for reading them. And with the guidelines, we also need to also be careful, because it's a machine that can harm people, and can harm because the producer didn't do it right. So we have to prevent this. We want a medical machine to help, not to make more damage. And so if the bike was not properly built, or the MRI is not properly built, you can have difficult situations, or the one that is running it, it's not skilled enough, you can also run into troubles. So also the guidelines will help. For example, there are countries that they don't need FDA approval, and those things that often make things very difficult, but there is no regulation. Then legally anyone could build it, and you don't know, you go to a hospital and you're not sure if you are walking into a machine that hasn't been, it's gonna work fine, or it may harm you. So we would like to figure it out, what are the guidelines that will help help in this sense as well, in regulating a little bit, making it safer. And this is not something that we are doing alone, because there are other medical devices. During the week, you may have seen, for example, the Open Pancreas keynote talk. It's another healthcare application, and she is looking into the approvals, and this is a big task. So working together, all these medical devices world, I think that we can tell each other, look, this is the way I did it. Maybe you want to take a similar approach. Devices are different, things are going to be different, but maybe we can make a blueprint, something that we can look at in order to move easier forward. And that's why there is this initiative that it is OpenQRSS, that is quality, reliability, and safety, specific for medical devices that we are collaborating with. And of course, it's something that we need to distribute to people. People need to use it, right? So we believe that making the threshold of building an MRI machine easier is the way to have more MRI machines, and it's actually helping modifying the MRI machines for different places. So you may have a local market in New Zealand, for example, with MRI machines with suspension for the earthquakes. And yes, things like this. Different markets, for example, there are countries that they don't have a stable power supply, so they will have to modify some things. But having it open source helps the local producers to fit their machines to their needs. Or even there are places, there is an initiative to help with a particular place in Africa that I don't remember where, that they are having there is a head problem with inflammations, that they have a lot of cases for that. So you could build a particular MRI machine that is only for that application, because it happens so often that it will be specific and it will do it better. And so now I would like to talk a little bit what has happened nowadays. So I showed you the perspective, the dream. And so far what we have been building is the first thing, trying to tell the initiative to people that work in MRI. It has been mostly in MRI, but it's open to everyone. But it's a bit where we have been moving in conferences where people work with MRI. And so far we have been gathering in this web page. Let's see if it works. Yeah. I have it in this other screen. So this is the web page that you could come, and it explains you a little bit. There are some news, the vision, the different projects. If you want to, you have, for example, I wanted to explain the principles of MRI because you are curious, but also because if you know what are the small bits. So this is not a complex thing, but there are a lot of small stories to it. There is a radio. People here, I'm sure there are many people that build their own radio station, and that's what we do for the power amplifiers, is radio frequencies, is in the megahertz. So I'm sure that people that know how to build radio amplifiers better than me, or low noise amplifiers. So it's, if people are aware that they can contribute, I think that that's something that we have to facilitate. And you can also join us for chat or seeing what's going on. But what I wanted to show is the projects where people are submitting their ideas. It's not only about MRIs, medical devices, or also a lab equipment to build things. And here you can see the projects. They come up randomly. We tried not to give any preference to anyone. So I'm going to put it like this. Otherwise, every time I open this page, everything is going to shift. And for example, something that is very valuable for us is to run simulations, because the way the signal is created is quite intricate. And these simulators, for example, this one that I have used, the Jambreeze, you can tell this program, look, I have this coil. It's a bit of a description of how it works. And this is how the magnetic fields of the coil that I have looks like. This coil has, I don't know how many ports. And the person that I'm studying, or the phantom, it looks like this, with these properties. And how is the signal going to look like if I apply magnetic fields like this and like that? And these are very handy, and they are actually surprisingly precise. And also in hardware, we have the same way we try to predict how the signal is going to be created. We try to predict how the magnetic fields are going to look like, because that's something that is very important for us. If we know what the magnetic field we are applying, we can know where it is coming from. If it's slightly different to what we know, we have artifacts. Things jump out of place, and we reconstruct images that they are not reliable. So something that I find also fascinating, it is nowadays in the commercial scanners, you have to learn their programming language. Each commercial scanner from its manufacturer has a specific programming language to program the sequences, how you apply the magnetic fields. And there is this initiative, here it is, PulseSec, where you override the manufacturer in this sense. You can tell the scanner, use the radio frequency like this at this time, listen at this time, use the magnetic field X gradient at this time, and you organize the sequences with only one software that is open source, and you can run, so far there's a few manufacturers that you can see there that have already been translated. And people are, in this sense, contributing to this initiative, and slowly we are getting more and more machines that you can run with this system. Let me go to more projects to show you what has happened there. Or maybe I should stop here because I'm running out of time. I wanted to show you one thing as well. And so there is not only tools for MRI, this COSI measure is something that they have made to know to measure the magnetic field. It's a robotic arm that you put the probe on the tip, and it's measuring sampling and gives you the magnetic fields, which is very handy when you have to know the magnetic fields in the case of permanent magnets, because I will show you in the next slides that we are trying to generate the magnetic field with permanent magnets. It's energy that is already there, and you don't need to plug it. You need to have superconducting materials, not cryogenic. You don't need liquid helium. But they change with temperature. The magnetic field of permanent magnets changes with temperature, for example, and they are not exactly the same when you buy them. So you have to calibrate them. And this machine is very important in that sense. And they have already used them with commercial MRI systems. And you can use it for other things like probing a temperature. So let's go back to the slides. Very good. So this is what the community has offered so far, and we are now working on making a wiki where people can not only put or advertise or showcase their projects, but also explain and talk about specific projects, and it's easier to follow. And this is the project one of the examples that it is a center that is trying to build the whole system open source. And this is the permanent magnets, how it looks like. That I find they are doing smarter than me, because I'm using the big magnets and it's so dangerous to use them. But these guys, for example, I think that if you trap your finger, it would be a bit less of a damage. So it depends how you arrange them. You see that they look like circles, and they are creating magnetic fields as we wanted in the center here. It's a strong magnetic field in one direction and fairly constant. So direction and fairly constant magnitude. That's quite important for MRI machines, very important. And then you have the gradient ring, that it is what is going to wobble. So you start from a fairly good equal magnetic field, and then you wobble it. And you wobble it in different directions in the space, and then you know where the signal is coming from. It's what we were saying before. And this is pretty much a mechanical MRI in this sense. And here you see how they put the permanent magnets together and how the system looks like. And you can see this in the center. This is where you will have your the limb, or at this stage it's maybe a bit small, but you could have probably the wrist. And then you have the permanent magnets in the other ring that you are with a stepper motor. You are rotating it to have enough information to decode the image. And down here you can see that there is a power amplifier, that it is like a radio power amplifier. And here you have a console. The console is like the brain of the MRI machine. And things happen very quick in the MRI. The signal comes really quick after you have applied the pulse. So you have to time it very well. And when you are timing it, you have to time a lot of inputs and outputs, digital and analog, in real time. So we use FPGAs. for this case. But not everything that they are using at this stage is open source. They are using some PCBs that they are not open source, but this is what they have done. It shows a little bit a schematic. Sometimes the console, they call it a spectrometer as well. And so the thing is that this group in Berlin is doing this project, and they run into a trouble. We have everything, but we cannot see an image. We cannot see the signal. It's lost somewhere, and that's the problem. The signal is so small, and you have so many things put together that you don't know where it's very difficult to debug. And there's another group in the Netherlands, Leiden, that they are doing the same concept. They are doing it. In this case, they are collaborating with Uganda, and they are building also a permanent magnet-based low-field MRI machine. And they say, "Hey, this is the beauty of open source. Hey, I have this problem. Come here." So what Lucas did, he put his MRI system in the car and drove from Germany to the Netherlands. And that's the beauty of open source, right? That you collaborating is much easier. And this is a little bit the vision. Right now, it is a small system, but it could be made bigger. That would be, once the things work for the small one, it could be moved a little bit to a bigger size. And I would like to, before finishing, to show an example of some colleagues that they are working also in the medical field, but with ultrasound. And they have done a small ultrasound, handheld ultrasound system that can be plugged to a smartphone. And they have already an initial prototype that's looking very good. And we are exchanging experiences and helping each other in the sense of it's not the same technology, but we face some similar problems. And this is the image that they have created. You can compare it with an ultrasound in the smartphone. So this is a bit the vision that we are going to make the equivalent of a bicycle for MRI. And maybe we don't need to plug it into the net, and the patient can generate electricity for his own image. And I would like to thank the community. Probably there are more names. And I would like to thank you all and the organizers from the conference for giving us the opportunity of bringing the concept here. Thank you. Y ahora.
We've still got a few minutes for questions, so anybody?
Hi. Last year, the ultrasound, the low-cost ultrasound was on Hacker News, and their main problem was the ceramics were hard to make for it. Did they solve that? And can I buy one?
I don't know. I haven't followed the last steps, so I don't know about that problem.
Yeah, the blog post was saying this is a technology from the 70s, and the computation was the problem, and now you can do it in a phone. What about the MRI? Do you think this could be done in a phone? It's a technology from the 80s, right? MRI.
The MRI started in the 50s, but imaging in the 70s, I believe, yeah. 70s.
So you think we have enough computation power in phones now to do it there?
For the simplest sequences, yes, it's a Fourier transform, two-dimensional, three-dimensional Fourier transform. That can be done. But because we need to extract more signal, we need to play smarter sequences, and that's going to probably come at a price of more computing.
So the worse the sensor, the best the CPU has to be.
Yeah, that's it. But computers are more affordable. Yeah.
There's a lot of expertise wrapped up in companies like Philips and Siemens. Are you finding contributions from them to this?
So far, not. No, I think that we are not a threat for them at this stage. But we have heard of smaller companies that they used to be building MRI machines, and they are not able to compete anymore in the standard model. And they are showing interest in the sense they think before we die, maybe we offer the things open source. And there are, for example, some software for spectroscopy that those companies, they have made open source. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Ruben. think we're out of time now.
Thanks.
Again.